Tablet 1. Gilgamesh was a great king of the ancient city of Uruk in Sumer. He was 1/3 human and 2/3 god. I don't know, man, you can do the maths on that, I'm not. His mother was Ninsun, a goddess. By all accounts, Gilgamesh was a bit of an arsehole. He would attack men on the street on their way home just for fun, and he would rape women before they were married, claiming it was his right as king. Jesus Christ, why is this guy so revered? Gilgamesh begins to have dreams. He has 2 dreams, in fact. One is that of a star falling to earth as a giant boulder, and he cannot move. The second dream being that of an axe lay in Uruk town centre. Both the axe and the boulder represent an equal who will challenge him. This rival comes in the form of Enkidu, a wild man made by the fertility goddess Uruk. Enkidu lives among the wild beasts, finding a gazelle herd to live with. He spends his time freeing beasts from traps and disabling other traps. A hunter sees him and goes to his father and complains. His father tells him to go to Uruk and get Shamhat, the harlot, a prostitute, to tempt Enkidu. He fetches her, and they make love for 6 days and 7 nights straight. Could you just imagine the chafing, man? Jesus Christ. This causes the gazelle herd to abandon him. He has been tainted by the human world. With nowhere left for him, Shamhat tells him of Uruk and Gilgamesh. In the temples to Anu, the supreme sky god, father of all of the gods, and Ishtar, goddess of warfare, sex and love. She sounds hot. So they set off to Uruk. Tablet 2. Upon heading to Uruk, Enkidu and Shamhat are taken in by a shepherd. The shepherd makes a comment about how much he resembles Gilgamesh in strength. A little shorter and slightly bulkier, but similar nonetheless. I like to imagine Gilgamesh as Goku and Enkidu as Vegeta. They offer him bread and ale, but he does not understand how to eat bread or drink ale. Shamhat shows him, and he proceeds to get smashed. The shepherds like Enkidu and offer him a job as a guard. He's to stand and protect the flock in the night from wolves and lions, at which he excels. He continues here for a while, guarding sheep, eating bread and drinking ale, beholding Shamhat till he sees a well-dressed traveller. He asks the man, what is he doing and where is he going? The traveller tells Enkidu that he's going to Uruk for a wedding. Enkidu inquires more and learns of Gilgamesh's birthright to sleep with the bride before the groom. This enrages Enkidu, and he sets off to Uruk. Arriving in the town, he confronts Gilgamesh, and they fight. The battle is a mighty one. They make the ground and the buildings shake, the earth cracks, and at the end, they are on their knees. In some interpretations, Enkidu admits that Gilgamesh is stronger, and others state that they are evenly matched. I prefer the latter. They then kiss and become friends. Gilgamesh decides to introduce Enkidu to his mother, Ninsun. Ninsun greets him and proceeds to explain how Enkidu has no kin, no family, no brothers. Enkidu then breaks down weeping, to which Gilgamesh consoles him. Conversation soon changes, and they begin to talk of Humbaba, a giant living in the cedar forest. His voice is the deluge. He speaks fire and breathes death. Truly an evil monster, strongest of all, second to Adad, the weather god. Gilgamesh thinks they should go and slay Humbaba. Enkidu says they should not. He knows Humbaba. He knows his power. They are no match. The elders come to the same conclusion as Enkidu and continue making attempts to dissuade Gilgamesh. In response, Gilgamesh simply laughs and says, now my friend, how frightened I am. In fear of him, shall I change my mind? Tablet 3. Enkidu and Gilgamesh, deciding that they are going to go after Humbaba, go to Ninsun, Gilgamesh's mother. Seeking advice and assistance, when asked, Ninsun takes 7 baths. Apparently one's just not good enough. She dresses in a fine dress, places a jewel on her breast, puts on her tiara, and ascends to the roof. Setting up a censer to Shamash, the sun god, she begins a ritual. She asks that he protect his son. Asks that he make the days longer so Gilgamesh and Enkidu may travel farther, and may keep them safe in the light so they may slay Humbaba. Shamash complies and Ninsun replies. She then adopts Enkidu as her own, officially making him and Gilgamesh brothers.
And you better bet your bottom dollar that these 2 brothers know how to handle business.
It's quite a beautiful passage actually. Following this, Gilgamesh tells the elders how to rule in his absence, and they set off on their adventure. To be honest, I don't know why they listened to Gilgamesh on how to rule. 2 tablets ago, he was an arsehole. Tablet 4. So, the guys set off and walk 50 leagues a day, and only make camp every 3 days. Now, I'm willing to do the maths here for you. I wasn't earlier, but I am now. 1 league is 5.556 kilometres, and they walk 50 leagues a day. stop every 3 days, so 150 leagues is 833.4 kilometres, or 518 miles roughly. For reference, that's the same distance as walking from Manchester, England to Hesse in Germany. Or like walking to the moon and back, just giving up really early. They make camp and Gilgamesh starts a ritual to induce dreams. His first dream is of falling down a mountain into a valley. Gilgamesh wakes up terrified and describes his dream to Enkidu and asks his counsel. Enkidu says it's a good omen and that the mountain could not be Humbaba. They journey for another 3 days and set up camp. And repeating the ritual, Gilgamesh has a second dream. This plays out the same as the first one, but an attractive man saves him. He seeks Enkidu's counsel again, and he says it's all good, bro. That man was Shamash. They travel yet another 3 days, perform the ritual, and have a dream. In dream 3, heaven cries out, the earth shakes around Gilgamesh, the world turns dark, lightning strikes, and roaring fires start, until the rain pours down, leaving nothing but cinders. Enkidu once again eases Gilgamesh's mind and convinces him that it's a good omen. Travel, ritual, dream. Dream 4 starts with Gilgamesh seeing a thunderbird.
Thunderbirds are go.
It soars through the clouds with a mouth of fire, breathing death, until Gilgamesh sees a man next to him who destroys the thunderbird, probably Ben Kingsley. Enkidu disagrees, however. He says it isn't the Hood, but instead it's Shamash helping against Humbaba. You know the drill. During Dream 5, Gilgamesh rides a great bull that feeds him water and goes into the fight. Enkidu tells him that the bull was again Shamash, supporting him. They are by now close to Humbaba's home, the Cedar Wood. So that's 4,167 kilometres in just 15 days, or 2,590 miles. Again, to put that in perspective, that is the distance between Manchester and Azerbaijan. Or like walking to the sun and back, and just giving up really early. Both their spirits now begin to waver, but they encourage each other, and their resolve comes back. Dabble it 5. Our heroes draw their weapons and enter the forest of cedar. They close in on Humbaba like a pair of wolves on their prey. They find Humbaba and confront him. When he spots them, Humbaba, enraged that he is being attacked, calls Enkidu a traitor. They both grew up in the woods. They are the same. Humbaba keeps hurling insults at them. Enkidu instead simply urges Gilgamesh to kill him swiftly. Shamash summons the 13 winds to trap Humbaba so that he cannot escape. The winds are the south wind, the north wind, the east and west, blast and counterblast, typhoon, hurricane and tornado, tempest and gale, frost wind and the devil wind. Humbaba, trapped, pleads for his life, but Enkidu again advises to kill him swiftly. Seeing there is no escape, Humbaba curses both of them before Gilgamesh drives his blade into Humbaba's neck and cuts off his head.
I shouldn't.
Do it.
To celebrate their success, Enkidu cuts down some of the sacred cedar trees to make a great door for the god Enlil and build a raft to head home, taking Humbaba's head as prize. Tablet 6. Back in Uruk, Gilgamesh strips himself of his filthy armour. Ishtar, seeing his radiant beauty, comes down from heavens to propose. Gilgamesh then just rips into Ishtar for like 54 lines. Here's the full quote. There are bits of it missing due to damage from time, but here is what we have. Body and clothing. Whence would come my food and my sustenance? Would you feed me bread that is fit for a god, and pour me ale that is fit for a king? Who is there would take you in marriage? You, a frost that congeals no ice, a Louvre door that stays not breeze nor draught, a palace that massacres warriors, an elephant which in hoods, bitumen that stains the hands of its bearer, a water skin that cuts the hands of its bearer, limestone that weakens a wall of ashlar, a battering ram that destroys the walls of the enemy, a shoe that bites the foot of its owner. What bridegroom of yours did endure forever? What brave warrior of yours went up to the heavens? Come, let me tell you the tale of your lovers. There's a section missing here. His arms, Dumuzi, the lover of your youth, year upon year to lamenting you doomed him. You loved the speckled Alaloo bird, but struck him down and broke his wing. Now he stands in the woods crying, my wing. You loved the lion, perfect in strength, but for him you dug 7 pits and 7. You loved the horse, so famed in battle, but you made his destiny whip, spur and lash. You made his destiny a 7-league gallop. You made his destiny to drink muddy water and doomed Silili, his mother, to perpetual weeping. You loved the shepherd, the grazier, the herdsman, who gave you piles of loaves baked in embers and slaughtered kids for you day after day. You struck him and turned him into a wolf. Now his very own shepherd boy chases him away and his dogs take bites at his haunches. You loved Ishulanu, your father's gardener, who used to bring you dates in a basket, daily making your table gleam. You eyed him up and went to meet him. Oh, my Ishulanu, let us taste your vigour. Put your hand and stroke my quim. But Ishulanu said to you, Me? What do you want of me? Did my mother not bake? Have I not eaten? And now I should eat the bread of slander and insults? Should I let only rushes cover me in winter? When you heard what he'd said, you struck him and turned him into a dwarf. You sat him down in the midst of his labours. He cannot go up, he cannot go down. Must you love me also, and deal with me likewise? Ishtar, scorned, returns to her father Anu and Antu, her mother, and asks them for the bull of heaven to kill Gilgamesh. If she doesn't get him, she will break down the gates of the netherworld and raise the army of the dead. Anu says that there is a ritual that must be prepared, but Ishtar has had the ritual prepared for a while, just in case. They raise the bull and release it into Uruk. The bull proceeds to make 3 rifts. The first swallows 100 people, the second 200, and the third attempts to swallow Enkidu, but he leaps out, grabs the bull by the horns. The bull spits in his face. Enkidu tells Gilgamesh how to kill the bull, and they proceed with their plan. Enkidu breaks the back legs of the bull, and Gilgamesh, like a butcher, drives his knife into the skull of the bull, killing it. They offer the heart of the bull to Shamash as a sacrifice. Ishtar screams and yells in rage outside of Uruk about how her plan has failed. The town decides to make an oil container from the bull's massive horns, while the townsfolk, especially the women, cheer. Oh, how fine and glorious Gilgamesh is. I mean, only 5 tablets ago he was an arsehole tyrant, but let's forget about that. They settle in for the night and Enkidu has a dream. He awakes, turns to his friend and speaks. Tablet 7. Enkidu, looking to Gilgamesh, he starts relaying information about his dream. He saw 4 gods sat round. Anu, Enlil, Shamash, and Ea.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
The gods are enraged. Gilgamesh and Enkidu have killed Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven. They must pay with one of their deaths. Shamash is angered by this and chastises them. They wanted Enkidu and Gilgamesh to kill the beasts. They made them do it. And now they've turned on Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enlil gives a pathetic retort and they decide Enkidu will die. Enkidu is distraught and then turns to the door he made for Enlil. He rants at it as if it were a man. It did nothing, even though he built it to honour the god Enlil. But Enlil now wishes to kill him. He screams in hysterics at how he should have made a raft of wood instead. But nothing can be done. His fate is sealed. In anger, he yells curses on people. First, the hunter and trapper who found him in the wild and brought Shamash to him, and then the harlot herself. The full curse is quite something, but in short, he says that she will become a barren, homeless woman, all her dresses covered in filth and not respected by anyone. Shamash, the sun god, is unhappy with this and comes down and says to Enkidu that this woman fed him bread fit for a god and ale fit for a king. She clothed him and laid with him and gave him shelter. Enkidu, realizing his mistake, instead blesses her. Instead, she will get a rich husband and live in luxury and have 7 children. Enkidu next has a vision and relays it to his friend. He sees all the previous kings of Uruk in the netherworld. He sees the underworld gods and finally the queen of hell, Ereshkigal. After he has relayed the vision to Gilgamesh, he becomes quite ill. Over the course of the next 12 days, his condition gets worse and worse, and on the 12th day, Enkidu calls for his brother one last time and laments his pitiful death. As he did not die in battle, no one will remember him. Oh Enkidu, how wrong you were. The rest is lost, but at some point in the 30 or so missing lines, Enkidu passes away. Tablet 8. Gilgamesh spends a great while lamenting the death of his friend. He is heartbroken. The sorrow in his heart is unmatched. He declares that the animals will mourn the death of this man of the wild, as does all of Uruk. Even the mighty river Euphrates will mourn him. He begins the funerary rites, and every member of Uruk helps and provides what they can. Though a lot of what is provided is known, the part saying Q specifically provides what is thus far lost. Gilgamesh funds the building of a statue for Enkidu, and the townsfolk help him build it. And then Gilgamesh begins offering presumably very lavish items to the gods, so that they may allow Enkidu to walk among them as a god. I say presumably because a lot of what is given is lost, but some remaining portions do mention gold and lapis lazuli, though we do know at least some of the gods that receive the offerings. There is then a short bit of damage, and when it resumes, an unknown man is talking to Gilgamesh. Though from context, I personally would guess it's an elder, but that is just me. After the elder is finished talking, Gilgamesh has the idea to dam a river. The next 30 or so lines are lost. Tablet 9. Gilgamesh, having laid his friend and brother Enkidu to rest, continues to mourn and speak of how afraid of the underworld he is. He speaks of Utnapishti, a man who is immortal. Gilgamesh begins to wander, looking for Utnapishti. Shamash, seeing this, asks why he is wandering. He will never be immortal. Gilgamesh says how he hates the fact that when he dies, he shall go to the dark netherworld and never see the light of the sun again. Gilgamesh heads to the twin mountains of Marshu. This is where the sun rises. The gates of the realm of the gods lay here, guarded by scorpion men. Their glances could kill a man, but Gilgamesh is no ordinary man. After a short conversation, the scorpion men realize he is 2/3 god and let him pass. Gilgamesh then follows the path of the sun till he finds the realm of the gods. Arriving in the realm of the gods, he sees a tavern by the shore of a heavenly sea. He heads down to try and find some information, and a goddess named Shiduri runs the tavern. Seeing Gilgamesh clad in skins and looking terrifying, she locks the doors and heads to a roof to speak with him from a distance. They talk, and Gilgamesh asks where he may find Utnapishti. She responds derisively and tells him that there is no way across except the boatman Ur-Shanabi and his stone men. They could sail him across, so Gilgamesh takes off to find the boatman and finds him with his stone men. He attacks them and destroys the stone men and pins down Ur-Shanabi. For some reason, don't know why, just does. Gilgamesh demands he be taken across the sea, across the waters of death. Ur-Shanabi laughs. The only way Gilgamesh could have crossed the sea was with the stone men, and they have been destroyed by Gilgamesh. He begs there must be another way. There is. He must make punting poles, so they may push their way across without touching the waters of death. They make enough to get them 240 furlongs, but this is not enough, and construct a sail from their clothes, finally arriving at Utnapishti's home. At the home of Utnapishti, he relays his story, him being a king, the fight with Enkidu, their friendship, when they slayed Umbaba and the Bull of Heaven, Enkidu's death and his subsequent despair. Utnapishti hears his despair and responds coldly. You were born a king, Gilgamesh, and you are upset at the simplest things. Think of the fool who has nothing, and you have everything, how ungrateful you are. Tablet 11. Gilgamesh asks how Utnapishti got the gift of immortality, and Utnapishti tells him he was warned by the god Ea of a coming flood, the deluge, and he must build a great ship, load it with his family, his possessions, and all the animals he can. Then the flood came, in a mighty, unrelenting storm. For days they were battered by the storm until it finally calmed down, and there was a flat, endless sea. For 7 days Utnapishti drifted every day, releasing a bird in search of land, until the 7th day, when the bird he released did not return. There must be land then. Enlil is enraged at his survival. He made the flood to punish humanity, yet some survived. Ea will have none of this though. Not all humans are to blame for the actions of the unvirtuous. Utnapishti is a good man, and a flood was the wrong way to deal with this problem. They should have used lions or wolves to attack the vicious, not a flood. Enlil, realizing the errors of his ways, grants Utnapishti and his wife the gift of immortality. Utnapishti then sets his guest a challenge. Since he stayed awake 7 days to send out birds, he says that Gilgamesh should try to stay awake for 7 days. As soon as the challenge starts, he falls asleep for 7 days. Gilgamesh cannot conquer sleep. How can he conquer death? When he wakes, having his immortality denied, he is sent on his way and is told of an underwater plant. This plant has rejuvenating properties. If eaten, it will make him young again. So Gilgamesh dives to the depths of the ocean and retrieves it. Satisfied by his victory, He goes to a hot spring to bathe and lets his guard down. A passing snake smells the plant and is enticed and steals it. Gilgamesh, realizing he will never again find the plant, returns home and accepts that Uruk is where he will die. So, with this being the second oldest surviving religious text, you're probably wondering how we know what it says. Well, this too is quite a rabbit hole. It was originally written in cuneiform script in ancient Babylonia and Sumeria, and we now have it directly translated into English. So where to start? Well, the things to understand are that when things are transcribed into another script, they are translated sound by sound. Dr. Jackson Crawford is a professor of linguistics, specialising in Norse languages at Colorado University. In his video, link in the description, he talks about how scribes translating Old Norse into Old English would be conservative and stick to the rules. This can be applied here. Foreign visitors would transcribe the tablets down syllable by syllable into languages we have a much better understanding of, such as Akkadian. This would then go into Hittite and so on. Since we have the original text, we can work out a syllabic translation. It should also be noted that ambiguity on the sound of a particular cuneiform can be worked out by looking at other words sharing that cuneiform. What makes this slightly more difficult are a few things. First, there are 3 types of cuneiform symbol: punctuation, syllable, and whole word. But that isn't too much of a challenge, just slightly more difficult. What makes this a real challenge is what Akkadians would do with Sumerian words and the Sumerian symbols. So they would keep the Sumerian word and the Sumerian symbols, but they would speak it as if it was Akkadian. These are called sumerograms. For example, imagine if we took the word polis from Greek meaning city and still wrote polis in Greek, but when we said it, we just read it as city. Do you see how that's a bit weird? So sometimes words are translated like this, and it adds some difficulty. What makes things further difficult are the fact that the Hittites would do this to Akkadian, and these were called akkadograms. If this has confused you to high hell, don't worry, it does me, and professional linguists do understand this, so we do have translations. So, the first thing that one would do is to translate each symbol cuneiform by cuneiform, and add in missing or damaged pieces from other sources. Then the symbols are collapsed into syllables, with alternative spellings or interpretations at the end. These syllables are then subsequently collapsed into words, so it is readable in Roman script. But obviously this is a poem, so one must then interpret the punctuation cuneiforms into English, French, German, or whatever is needed, so that we can get the actual rhythm, and we can finally read this long dead language. This section is where I fly off the handle about ancient texts with probably not real characters, that even if they did exist are long dead and no one believes in anymore. That being said, fuck Gilgamesh. All my homies hate Gilgamesh. Like, what an arsehole. I mean, sure, after Enkidu comes along, sure, he's a cool guy, you know, he does good shit, you know, whatever. But before that, the man was literally out here abusing women and attacking men. What a fucking cunt. Something else that should be noted about the text is the version I have given you is the classic version, but there are many other versions which include Gilgamesh's final death, a journey to the netherworld, and many different names for gods and beasts. For instance, Humbaba is called Huwawa. Ooh-wah-wah. There are also other versions that portray Enkidu as Gilgamesh's servant and perhaps also lover. The versions I have given you is by far not the only version. There are other versions where, in Enkidu's vision, he sees a shade who died by burning and was in agony in the underworld. I mention this now because it has had a massive influence on Islam and the Middle East, and to this day some Middle Eastern Muslim cultures are afraid of death by burning. So, this bit's going to be in 2 sections. The first will be influence on religious texts, and the second on pop culture. Being one of the oldest religious texts in the world, it has had quite a few stories taken from it. First, let's talk about the Bible. Some influences are obvious and some are not. The Garden of Eden story in Genesis seems to borrow heavily from the relationship that Enkidu and Shamat have. A man created by a god alone, living peacefully in the wild until a woman comes along, tempts him with her ways, till he performs an act that means he must be forced out of his home. For Adam, this was Eden. Enkidu, it was the wilderness. Andrew George claims that the story of Utnapishtim surviving the deluge clearly inspired Noah's flood in the book of Genesis, going so far as claiming that this is something that in fact few would doubt. However, a Jewish scholar has disputed this, one Robert Wexler. He claims that instead the deluge and the flood were instead inspired by a story that existed prior in Near Eastern Mesopotamian culture. Personally, I'm inclined to agree with George. That being said, I'm not a professional theologian. It's also claimed that Homer was significantly influenced by the epic. Zvi Abush, probably just butchered that pronunciation, I'm very sorry, states that the power and tragedy of the Iliad can be seen in the loss of Enkidu, and the wondering and marvels of the Odyssey can be seen throughout. It is also understood that Ishtar was stolen by the Greeks to make Aphrodite. There is an excellent video on this exact migration by Overly Sarcastic Productions' channel, but the gist of it is that Ishtar became Aphrodite, then dropping her warlike tendencies across Greece for, guess where? Sparta! So, up until the end of the First World War, there was no reliable translations of the actual epic available to a wider audience. Before then, only scholars really had access to it. But it never really took off until after the Second World War, especially in Germany, where comparisons were made not only between the existential wandering of Gilgamesh and the existential emptiness and confusion many Germans felt after having their world and political system changed. Obviously, this was for the better, but would have been quite strange in Germany. But there were also comparisons made between the netherworld of Enkidu's dreams and the bombed-out German cities. The story was not quite as popular in the English-speaking world until the 1950s and 60s. A radio play by Douglas Bridson called The Quest of Gilgamesh helped to popularise it in the UK in 1953. The US then caught on in the 60s, when free love was in its prime. The idea of homosexuality began to retake its grip in force. Many cited Gilgamesh and Enkidu's relationship as a homoerotic relationship. Personally, I see their love as more fraternal, but it's open to interpretation, and different versions definitely do portray them like lovers. In the 70s and 80s, Gilgamesh was reinterpreted yet again, this time by second-wave feminism, who saw the story of Ninsun's transfer of control to Gilgamesh as a move from matriarchal society to patriarchal. Not here to get politically charged, and I'm certainly no expert on classics. I'm not an expert at many things today, maybe philosophy. That is what my degrees are in, but yeah, it kind of kills your love doing degrees in a subject. Well, not degrees, but this is off topic. Maybe I'll cut this. Maybe I won't. Anyway, I think this is a stretch. I think this is a stretch. Something that seems much more applicable is how the Green Movement used the idea of Enkidu's death to symbolise the separation of man from nature. But in my opinion, this theme seems to penetrate throughout the whole narrative instead. From the start, the removal of Enkidu from nature, the killing of Umbaba and the destruction of the cedar, the murder of the Bull of Heaven, and finally Enkidu's eventual death. It all seems to show that mankind was driving a divide between themselves and nature, and things that come from nature seem to die in human environments, like Enkidu. Something quite strange is that when the epic began to be read again in Iraq, a certain Saddam Hussein became fascinated, often comparing himself to Gilgamesh and writing his own stories set in ancient Assyria, which he used as allegories for the Gulf War, heavily inspired by the epics. Obviously, Gilgamesh has had a massive influence on pop culture. I won't cover every single story here, just my favourites and the most famous. Obviously, there are books from Germany comparing it to post-war Germany by people like Kassak, and the homosexual portrayals by people like Jan, or Jan. It is a German name, so maybe it is Jan. Spawning the genre in Germany known as queer literature. In the great American novel, Gilgamesh's story is retold, but instead of an epic, it is told in the form of a baseball player in the 30s. In Carl Sagan's Contact, a science fiction book, Haddon seeks immortality mirroring Gilgamesh, and the chapter itself is called Gilgamesh. In a Doctor Who novel called Time Worm Genesis, spelt with Y's because we're cool, the story of Gilgamesh is retold through the Doctor's eyes. It also inspired animes and mangas including Fate Stay Night and Fate Zero, the later of which Gilgamesh appears as a summonable servant. Gilgamesh has also inspired many operas and compositions, from Turkey to Denmark. One of particular note is Bilgamesh by Ashot Arivan, because it's actually written and performed in ancient Sumerian and Akkadian.
This doesn't make any sense!
In popular music, J-rock band Gilgamesh are named after the hero, and many of their songs reference the epic. Other famous bands that have had songs inspired by the epic include They Might Be Giants and Dragon Force, among others. Personally, I can recommend the Dragon Force song, it's pretty good. It's about 10 minutes long though, so you gotta commit. Several stage plays have taken inspiration from it, as have many films, including 2 Fate Stay Night films and its anime. There is also another anime that retells the epic, it's just called Gilgamesh. The name makes an appearance in sci-fi, often being seen in both Star Trek TNG and Futurama. In Marvel Comics, one of the Eternals who lives on Olympus is Gilgamesh. In the Final Fantasy video game series, several boss fights are against Gilgamesh and his sidekick Enkidu. The Civilization games are known for their references to myth and history, and Gilgamesh is featured as a leader of Sumer in some games and as a great person in others. In the card game Shadowverse, one can acquire a card based on Gilgamesh, and finally, there are several children's books based on the epic. So, that's the Epic of Gilgamesh, and my first ever special episode. Woo! Yeah! I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I worked for like months on this, so I won't keep you too long. I've kept you for like half an hour now. My social medias are in the descriptions. Please go follow them and join the subreddit. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the special. I love seeing your guys' comments. Leave a like if you haven't already. Subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you so much for watching, and I really do hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you on Friday for my weekly vid, babies.